Scripture reading this morning will be This evening will be Psalms 9, the entire psalm, Psalm 9. I will give thanks to the Lord with all my heart. I will tell of all your wonders. I will be glad and exult in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. When my enemies turn back, they stumble and perish before you, for you have maintained my just cause. You have sat on the throne, judging righteously. You have rebuked the nations. You have destroyed the wicked. You have blotted out their names forever and ever. The enemy has come to an end in perpetual ruins. And you have uprooted the cities. The very memory of them has perished. But the Lord abides forever. He has established his throne for judgment, and he will judge the world in righteousness. He will execute judgment for the peoples with equity. The Lord also will be a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. And those who know your name will put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. Sing praises to the Lord who dwell in Zion. Declare among the people his deeds. For he who requires blood remembers them. He does not forget the cry of the afflicted. Be gracious to me, O Lord. See my affliction from those who hate me, who lift me up. You lift me up from the gates of death, that I may tell of all your praises, that in the gates of the daughter of Zion I may rejoice in your salvation. The nations have sunk down in the pit which they have made, in the net which they hid. Their own foot has been caught. The Lord has made himself known. He has executed judgment. In the work of his own hands, the wicked is snared. Hagion, Selah. The wicked will return to Sheol, even all the nations who forget God, for the needy will not always be forgotten, nor the hope of the afflicted perish forever. Arise, O Lord, do not let man prevail. Let the nations be judged before you. Put them in fear, O Lord. Let the nations know that they are but men. Selah. If you fly very often, you have learned to pay attention and to be aware of gate changes. As you get off the plane, even as you know that you have a connecting flight, you walk off that plane, and what are you supposed to do? Even if you know on your ticket it says that you are supposed to go to a certain gate, you look up at the board, right? You find out if that plane is on time or if it's going to depart on time. You find out if that gate has changed. Now, if it's in the same pod, then that's not that very big of a deal if it's just right there, but it can be. And so as you get a little more aware, you watch out for gate changes. Did you see the gate change within Psalm chapter 9 that we just read here? And this is kind of one of those preacher one-track kind of mind sort of things. But he says there in verse 13, look at it again. See my affliction from those who hate me. You lift me up from the gates of death, that I may tell of all of your praises, that in the gates of the daughter of Zion I may rejoice in your salvation. In your journey on life, are you due a gate change? Now, what does a gate change imply? But sometimes it means simply that a plane has pulled up and maybe it's in its wrong spot and it has to go to another place. But generally speaking, you think of a gate and you look up at it and it says, okay, this plane is going to Chicago, or that plane is going to Houston, or this plane is going to San Diego. But you know that if you are sitting there at that gate, that is where you're going for the day. And you may have had the experience of sitting at a gate for a number of minutes and it was the wrong gate. What the psalmist has just said is that he has had a gate change in the Lord. The Lord has changed him from the gates of death to the gates that belong to Zion, by contrast to the gates of salvation. It's the gate of life. Have you ever had a near-death experience, a close call? Or have you ever had somebody that you love that had a near-death experience? My sister, whenever She was in high school. She was actually hit by a car. Teresa wasn't hurt. The car was totaled. No, I'm joking. But they were on a band trip, and for some reason or other, the band director and the bus driver wanted to stop at a 7-Eleven type of a shop, and instead of pulling the bus into the parking lot, they just parked the bus on the side of the highway, on the right side of the highway, and made all of the kids get out of the bus and to cross 2 lanes of highway in order to get to the gas station. And my sister was one of the last ones that was off the bus, and the car wasn't moving all that fast. She had a pretty good sized bruise that sent her flying. But I just can't imagine getting a call as a parent in the night saying that your child has been hit by a car, and what kind of things will go through your mind. What does that do for you whenever you go through something like that? Those kinds of events, whenever they take place, they demand reassessment, don't they? Near-death experiences, if you've ever had something like a sickness where you feel like you just barely made it by the skin of your teeth, you begin to appreciate that individual or your own life, and you begin to assess. And what we're going to do this evening and look at what God says within the scriptures with regards to our current activities determining our destination. Are we due a gate change? If I was to ask you right now, where are you going? What would you tell me? Do you have a big trip that's planned? Where are you going? Would you say, we're going up to Minnesota? The lambs are gone to Minnesota right now. Would you say, I'm going to Dakota, South Dakota? Would you say, I'm going to Oklahoma? Not right now, right? It's too cold up there right now. But where are you going? Not today, not tomorrow, but with the current lifestyle that you are living, where are you going? Can you imagine, thinking back 10 years ago now or more, if before that Malaysian airliner, if you're aware of what happened to it, can you imagine if at the gate that they would have said, this flight is going to disappear off the radar map, or it's going to crash into the Indian Ocean? Would you have boarded? Now, once in a while, people seem to have some sort of a eerie feeling or a premonition, or maybe it's just circumstances that causes them not to board a flight that seems to be doomed to crash. But if you could imagine a terminal where they could predict safe landings, I mean, how many of you would stand at a gate that said that this plane is destined to crash? And we all know that those things happen when flying, and I'm not helping you to fly right now, am I? But they keep telling us that flying is safer than driving in cars, and I believe that. But we do keep on seeing more and more airplanes crash. But if they could actually tell us at the gate, this one is destined to crash, we would be going anywhere but there, wouldn't we? We would avoid that gate at all costs. And you talk about a brush with death. If they're going to tell us up front what is going to happen, then we are going to back away. The psalmist says, I was at the gates of death, but Lord, you changed my life. I was the afflicted one, and in this particular case, I don't think that the psalmist was saying that I was lost in sin. I think what he is simply saying is that his enemies are encompassing him and that he is without resources. But God, you came to my rescue and you moved me without any EMT, no ambulance or doctor. You took me, Lord, from the gates of death, and you have placed me within the gates of Zion. Is that a good thing? That would be a real good thing, because now he lives in the Lord. And so he says, I'm going to do something with this newfound life. I'm going to assess who I am and where I'm headed, and I am going to sing your praises, Lord. I am going to tell the entire world about you, because you are the one. You are everything to me, because you have given me life and you have sustained me. You have rescued me, and I know only in you is life. Now, just for a moment, God is being represented here as the gates of Zion. Salvation is here. What do the gates of death represent? Who were David's enemies? Who were the ones that were visiting afflictions upon him? Well, it was man being used, as we know, as a tool of Satan. But David's contrast is, in the Lord alone is life, because within man I have found discouragement. Within man I have found conflicts. Within man I have found wars. I have found attempts on my life. With man I find flesh and not the spirit. Is there a lesson in that for you and I? if my confidence is within my own flesh, if my confidence is within my strength, if my confidence is even within the strength of my loved one or my neighbor, if my confidence is based upon the ability of humans, then I am lost. David says, by contrast, I was transferred from the gates of death to the gates of life, to the gates of Zion. And so let me go back now, and you look at your life, and what gate is it that you are sitting at? Where are you going? What is your ultimate destination? Can you see the sign that is above the gate? If I am trusting in myself, if I am simply trusting in you, if I am trusting in my mindset of what I think is good and right within life, and I have set aside God and what He wills for me, then there is only one gate that I can sit at. And I am going to be disappointed whenever I trust others, and I'm going to be discouraged, and I am going to have things that come into my life that are necessary casualties, but ultimately I am going to be destroyed because it is the gates of death. Now, you would say, those people that hopped on that Malaysian flight 370, they didn't know. They didn't know that was going to happen. They boarded that plane in ignorance. And I would agree, yes, they did. And such is life, is it not? Such is life. You can't have confidence even if it was a brand new Boeing 777 with all the gizmos and all of the gadgets that are on it. Even if you had the finest of the fighter pilot or of pilots flying that plane, you still have no guarantee. What is your life? We look at last week. Boy, that's distracting. I am doing my best not to run. James says in James chapter 4, somebody videotape this, that life is but a mist, that your life is but a vapor. You are here for only a short while and then you're gone. And we know that what he is saying is that you have no guarantee about tomorrow. We have no assurance within this life that we are even going to live to be such and such an age. That's just not for us to know. God only knows those things. And so I place confidence in something without the possibility of knowing, my own flesh and my own strength, my confidence within my fellow man, and I place myself at the gates of death if I ultimately haven't already placed myself at the feet of God. And so whenever the psalmist talks about God and his deliverance and God and the things that he is capable of, he rejoices. Now, just as an aside, there are no airports that are recorded for us within the scriptures. Ezekiel gets close with the cherubim, right? With the wheel in the middle of the wheel. Those are flying beings, angelic beings that are flying. But there are no terminals within the Bible. But there are gates that are within the Bible. What do you think of whenever you think of a gate? Do you just see a picket fence that has a gate on it? Well, no, that's not the normal, what we would think of a gate within the Bible. And in fact, the Hebrew word that is used there for gate can also be translated door, and so it just depends upon what the context is. The gates of the city, does that bring anything to mind? Well, you have walls, and if you have a walled city and you don't have any gates that open, then basically you have a prison, but with gates opening during the day, the people can go in and out. Shutting them at night provides safety and security that is there. So depending upon those fortified walls, those gates can represent not only security, but it can represent opportunity. And in fact, in the Bible times, it was often a place of gathering. The gates were a place that were open during the daytime, which was usually the case. But then the merchants would come in at the nighttime whenever those gates were closed, and you would almost have right there at the entrance of the gate like a flea market. You know what a flea market is? And you can imagine it being like that at the entrance with the merchants wanting to get in, and just before daylight setting outside and then opening the gates and the merchants and all of their wares entering in. And so it's a gathering place. The gates also represented a place where you could get the news. And so it was quite literally the gates of information. And then it was a place where they would set up court. There were certain cities that were designated as being cities of refuge within the scriptures. There were 6 that were designated by God. And the gateway, as you see here in Joshua chapter 20 and verse 4, is where they would flee to. The person that had maybe mistakenly killed someone, they would be able to flee from the avenger, and they would come and they would meet the elders within the gate. And in fact, in Ruth chapter 4, wow, Lord help us. In Luke, oh man, he's coming right back at me too. It's in Ruth chapter 4, if you want to turn over there and look at that, whenever Boaz calls to him 10 elders of the city in order to decide who it is that is the next of kin that is going to be taking care of Ruth. And so the gates represent security, the gates represent opportunity, but the gates also represented judgment. Abraham was promised by God that he would be able to conquer the gates of his enemies. Now, we read over that, and it's just kind of a whole lot of words whenever we do. But what was he saying to Abraham? I will make you such a strong nation that you are going to be able to control the gates of your enemies. In other words, their gates are going to be at your disposal. A gate left unattended, a gate left open, a gate captured is then a gate that is subjugated, and a city that is subjugated. Remember whenever Samson was surrounded and they were going to kill him, and during the night, what did Samson do? It said that he ripped off the gates of the city and he carried him on his back all the way to the land of the mountain of Hebron. Man, that guy was a hoss, wasn't he? But in the prophecy there to Abraham that your descendants are going to possess the gates of their enemies, you see within Samson quite literal a personification of that promise and carrying away the gates of the enemy. And the gates were intended for death. Samson not only received life, but also strength, which God gave him, and he carried away those defenses of the wicked. Do you know what the scriptures are intended to do? Awake, O sleeper. The scriptures are intended for us to see. And you can't see if you have your eyes closed. The scriptures are intended to enlighten us and to alert us. The scriptures are there for us to see within those things that we have there, the pattern of lifestyle that is going to lead to destruction, and the pattern of life that God has set out that will lead to life. And here the psalmist says, I have come to a knowledge, and I rejoice in the fact that at the gates of Zion, my salvation has been provided by my God. And oh Lord, I will sing your praises, because the alternative that I have experienced at the hands of man, that is the gates of death. And so let me ask you, where are you headed? Where are you going today? The sign above the gate in which you are passing through, does it say life or death? He wasn't quite a young man anymore. He was several decades old. He had deceived his father and had left at the behest of his mother to go to a strange land to find himself a wife. And as he went on his journey, he got to a particular spot and he decided to stop, to call it a day. And so as he laid down to sleep, he took a stone as his pillow, and that night he dreamed. And oh, the dream that he dreamed. Am I being mysterious enough that you can't know who I'm talking about? It was Jacob, right? And Jacob, in that dream, sees angels on a ladder, angels on a staircase, angels ascending and descending from heaven right there where he slept. And whenever he awoke the next morning, he says, surely this is the house of God, and that I have been at the gates of heaven. Now that's pretty close to being at the gates of Zion, I would think. What was it that had been communicated to Jacob during the night? The God of my father is my God as well. Though I have left my father's house, my God has not abandoned me. He has not remained back there. My God is with me. And in fact, he receives the promise that Jacob, it doesn't matter where you go. You just keep on heading out. Go up to Hebron and I will be with you. And Jacob says, if you will be my God, then I will serve you forever. And so it happens that that covenant between Jacob and God is one that is established in sincerity right here. Before it had been God of his father, and now it's my God. He had slept at the very gate. God had allowed him to see that sign. God allowed him to understand, with me you're going to live, and with me you're going to prosper. And that happened within Jacob's life, didn't it? He accepted in faith that the Lord is salvation, and in him alone I have hope. I rejoice in my God. They were two men, and they came to a gate of a city, And they were sitting within the gate. And what did I tell you about gates? Gates were meeting places. Gates were places of commerce and of merchandise. Gates were a place of judgment, but gates were also a place that you could come and to find a place to sleep. If you came into the city and you wanted a place to sleep within that city, somebody, because of their hospitality, would come to you and they would say, "Do you not have a place to stay?" And you would say, "No, I do not have a place to stay." And they would invite you to come over and to sleep at their house. Can you imagine if we had such a system here within Wichita? Would you be one to go to somebody and to say, "Do you need a place to stay?" Well, these two men, they sat in the gate, and the man that came by, his name was Lot. What was the name of the city? What city are we talking about? Sodom. And Lot comes to him and he says, "Friends, you can't stay here. This is no place for you to stay the night." And they say, "Oh, no, it's all right. We're going to stay right here." And Lot urges them, and this is in Genesis chapter 19, verses 1 and following. But what did Lot know about that particular city? Remember, Samson captured the city gates and he carried them away. Remember, Abraham was told that you are going to conquer the gates of your enemies. City gates can be cities that are wicked, and they can be holding in that which is not that good. And in fact, God has already prophesied what about this town? That it's going to be destroyed. He had told that to Abraham, that its sin has risen up to me. In other words, the cup of wrath is full. It's time for them to be destroyed. Lot himself knew that those two strangers that sat at the gate that night were going to be ones that were going to experience death. Now, of course, he didn't know that those two strangers were actually angels. Did those angels really have anything to worry about of one person or two persons, three persons or four? No. What did one angel do to 186,000 Assyrians in one night? He destroyed them. An angel can handle themselves. They know what they are doing. They are from God. But Lot doesn't know that. Lot knows that their lives are in danger, and he is trying to say, "This place is not fit for you to sleep in." And he takes them home, and then who becomes the savior? Not Lot, but Jehovah. And Jehovah saves Lot and his wife for a little bit of time, and then his two daughters, of course, ultimately from Sodom and Gomorrah, and then he destroys them. Okay, I'm trying to set up a contrast here. And what a contrast that we have. Jacob slept at gates where angels ascended and descended. Two angels sat at a gate, which is soon to be covered with fire and brimstone. How do you tell the difference? How do you know which one is a gate to life and a gate to death? Only with the Lord's help. You can't depend upon yourself. And you can't depend upon those who rule by the flesh and gain by their own philosophies. You can only depend upon God and what he has delivered. And so let's go back to that passage in Psalm chapter 9. If I can get there. "See my affliction from those who hate me. You lift me up from the gates of death, that I may tell of all of your praises. That in the gates of the daughter of Zion, I may rejoice in your salvation." We had the experience before, whenever flying, of sitting at the wrong gate and finding out just a little bit late that we need to hustle across the terminal to the other side because they changed it while we were sitting there. What you can be confident of is that God's gates never change, that he has opened that gate for us to enter in. What we need to do is to pay attention and to know, where are we sitting? Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" And they said, "Some say Elijah, some say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." And this is in Matthew chapter 16. And he said, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter spoke up and he said, "You are the Christ. You are the Son of the living God." And Jesus said, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this unto you. And I will establish my kingdom, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." "I set before you," God said in Deuteronomy chapter 28, "life and death." The gates of life and the gates of death have been presented to you. Won't you come tonight as we stand and as we sing?